might be the first speaker, and I'm not going to be talking or pushing religion much as such, although I might part of the time, but I am a practicing Catholic, and that means that I subscribe to Catholicism, the Catholic Church, Catholic teaching, as the Pope teaches it. The current Pope, basically whichever Pope is in power, the Pope is a Pope. And I also try to practice that, hopefully, pretty well, but that's a different issue altogether. Now, this actually leads me to an interesting issue here, because I said that I subscribe to the Catholic teaching as the Pope teaches it. Do we know what the Pope teaches? See, the problem is that recently in the media, meaning within the last week, this week, we've had some pretty interesting reports about what the Pope is meant to have said. Do not believe it. Check the sources for yourself. It's on the internet. The whole interview, if you've got time to look at it in English. And also the Vatican itself has its own newspaper, which has its own media releases. It's funny how the previous Pope was, but it looks of it, not very open in his language, and therefore what he said did not leave much room for interpretation. It was very clear. And so the media basically spoke and wrote against what the Pope was saying. Unsurprising, because media is essentially anti-religious by definition, or at least popular media and not popular media, all. Sure, there are, Catholic newspapers, Christian newspapers, whatever. But big-time media is very anti-religious by definition. And it's quite irrelevant whether they call themselves liberals, conservatives, radicals, whatnot. Conservatism does not imply pro-religion necessarily. And indeed, conservatism nowadays implies pro-free market. And it does not seem to imply much more than that. Much more than that. There are other things, but they don't get promoted very regularly. So Pope Francis is very different in his personal approach. He's not very different in his teaching. He cannot be. He's the Pope. But he does have a very more down-to-earth, more socially conducive way of talking. Now, he talks in Italian, and because he on TV, I actually understand Italian. I know what he's saying. I don't know what he's saying simply because he talks Italian. I know what he's saying because I know what the Catholic Church teaches, because I've done my reading. But the point is that he tends to use a very user-friendly language, and the point is that the media can quite easily take what he's saying out of context, and they have in a big way this week. So don't go by it. The Pope is not a liberal in the political sense, in the social sense. No Pope ever can be. No church, legit Christian church ever can be. The left isn't what it used to be. There was a left which was into workers' rights and making sure that poverty got eradicated and stuff like that. People got paid good wages. Now the left has taken in a whole lot of fairy tales. For one thing, it's engaged the concept of multiculturalism to an extreme and unbalanced extent. Because of course there is nothing wrong with multiculturalism as such. True, common sense, multiculturalism, we'll get onto that. But multiculturalism as relativism, the idea that all cultures are equally good, is false. Indeed, when you assume that all cultures are equally good, what you're actually doing is assuming they are equally not good, equally artificially constructed, and therefore equally not very valuable. Also, it's taken on the idea that we should remove all distinction as to what constitutes a true marriage. We won't go there for the purpose of this talk, but the point is that the old left did not push that line. The new left has taken on all these trendy, nonsensical ideas, and it pushes those, and not so much economic democracy. Economic democracy basically meaning that everyone other than, sorry, everyone should have what they need to lead reasonable lives. It doesn't imply that we should have a huge welfare state, but it does imply that we should promote those conditions that allow people to basically lead good lives. And of course it goes without saying that those people who are not able to do much for themselves need to be supported by the community. Community here does not necessarily mean the welfare state, but the community nonetheless. That's a very difficult issue to discuss and really sort out. Of course, there is nothing wrong with the welfare state as such, if that's the only option available, but it all becomes very, very impersonal, and then the state becomes like the nanny, whereas it should be families as such who look after people in, you know, the local groups, whether they be religious, ethnic, whatever, because then it becomes a lot much more personal. And so it becomes a very difficult issue to really assess. I'm all over the place as usual, I know. About 1 month ago, maybe 2 months ago, I went to a public hall. It was at the Melbourne Town Hall. It was hosted by a Christian group, the Melbourne Bible Forum, I think it was. But the discussion was not a Christian discussion as such. They invited a very famous atheist, at least famous by popular standards. His name is Lawrence Krauss. Professor of physics, and no doubt a very good professor of physics. He wasn't there in that role, he was there as a promoting, you know, the anti-religious crusade and atheism. The person he was debating, so to speak, and he wasn't really a very much of a debate, was a Christian, evangelical Protestant Christian apologist by the name of, and I'm sorry I forgot his first name, but his surname is Craig. Craig is in the, you know, the man's name Craig. It was very interesting. It cost a fair bit, and I think it actually cost too much personally. But and then the speakers were selling their books. So Craig was selling his book, Reasonable Faith, and Krauss was selling his book and signing his book, A Universe from Nothing. They gave individual talks. Did not meet each other's arguments during the talks. Indeed, they did not meet each other's arguments very much, not even during the 1 hour discussion that followed the talks. Yeah.
Have you ever gone to one of those debates where one side has conceded that they're wrong and changed their mind?
And what?
Where one side has conceded that they're wrong and changed their mind based on the debate?
I have been to many debates where the debaters don't meet each other because they're using very different criteria. Now, although this event was put on by a Christian organisation, it was really about Christians and atheists actually getting to know each other's viewpoints and arguments, and it really was like that. There was really no attempt to misrepresent anyone. There was no attempt by any of the speakers to really turn the other speaker around very much. And that was great to see. It was really, really good to see and hear, because it doesn't usually happen. But it didn't go far enough. The reason it didn't go far enough is because the Christian speaker was a philosopher, a Christian philosopher, and Professor Krauss is a physicist. I'm not sure that he actually belongs to the group of the so-called new atheists. I think he does. And the point was that he was not talking philosophy, he was arguing in some sense, as I think he does in his book, that science, properly understood, leads us to this belief in God. Now, that's a very tall claim. I do not believe that science as such can actually have anything much to say about God and metaphysical realities. By all means, if someone has a point of view, whether it's a Christian or anti-religious, with two extremes, it is possible to use science in a way that apparently supports one's viewpoints. However, the viewpoint is assumed, it's not implicit in science as such. Now, I cannot recall many of the arguments that were made. All Dr. Craig, the Christian speaker, were trying to show was that not so much that philosophy proves Christianity, we know that philosophy proves nothing, but that philosophy showed that Christianity is a reasonable faith. The physicist was taking a very different viewpoint. He was arguing that the effects of physics show that God does not and cannot exist. So they didn't really meet each other. Also, there is a lot of historical, anecdotal evidence which didn't really get to the point. So, all in all, a rather poor performance, I thought. But it was good to see at least two divergent speakers being able to do their thing over a 2-hour event. There was no attack on the side of the oh, by the way, the moderator was Graham Uppy, who is professor of philosophy at Monash, I think. And he's an atheist himself. But yeah, we should have more debates like that around, in the sense that people should be allowed to actually put their point of view forward as it is.
Thank you. No worries, thanks for minding us.
Be heard. I don't spend a lot of time watching Q&A on the ABC, but I do believe that from what I've seen that the ABC are exactly the opposite. No one gets a fair go on the ABC. And as for the newspaper as well. Use them sparingly is my advice.
There was an atheist versus Muslim debate about a week ago at Swinburne.
That might have been interesting, as I might, for all I know, there could be good debates out there.
Yeah.
Maybe not, I don't know.
I also hear neither side addressed, each other's issues.
Yeah. And there is one very good reason why. Sorry, Dennis, were you going to say something?
I was just going to ask for your opinion why atheists always argue their position from a scientific point of view.
No, they don't. They argue from philosophical points of view, at least the good atheists. Good meaning the ones that have got good arguments.
Well, most of the ones I've seen are trying to use science to prove that God doesn't exist. But science is itself incomplete. And you could say philosophy is incomplete too. So where's the
certainly modern philosophy is extremely incomplete. It does not believe that it can be anything but incomplete. And then some people are extremely skeptical when it comes to philosophy. I subscribe to traditional Catholic philosophy, so we actually claim something that modern philosophers don't claim. We claim that we can actually get to some truths quite definitely, or almost definitely.
And that's generally what atheists deny, that there can be knowledge of God, because they can't prove that.
No, knowledge of the existence of God, not knowledge of God. We don't claim that through reason alone we can know a lot about God, although we will say that.
But you can have a relationship.
I can't give you the argument, you see, that's the problem. But given that human beings have a certain level of goodness, we would then argue that it is possible by looking at human goodness to then extrapolate that to infinite goodness, which is God. But I can't give you the argument.
No, but you can have a relationship with God and you can know that you have that, but you can't prove it.
Yeah.
And that's where atheism falls apart, because it says because you can't prove it, so there's no evidence for it, it can't exist. But every single atheist I've met believes in something or has faith in something which cannot be scientifically proven.
I think a good debate about, God versus atheist would have to be based on philosophy alone, not philosophy versus science. I do not believe that science and philosophy are at odds. I don't believe that science and philosophy meet very much.
Well, philosophy is a type of science, essentially.
But for the record, I have read philosophical books of the atheistic bent, which at least did seem to put forward some good arguments. Now, I don't accept their arguments, I'm a believing Christian, but they are good arguments nonetheless, and that's the whole point. Philosophical atheists do manage to put together some good arguments. Atheistic scientists do not manage to put forward good arguments. It's just not in science, you know, to allow them to do that.
That's the problem with the new atheism, because it is heavily.
Yeah, and that's why they're such easy targets.
Yeah. And for the record, you know, even though I'm not a Catholic or religious, I guess I oppose both atheism and religion.
You what? You oppose both.
Yes. I sort of an agnostic, but I think there is a possibility that there is a God. And it is possible that people can know God and cannot prove to others that they know God. But I'm very skeptical of those who claim to know the nature of God.
We cannot get to know the nature of God in any exhaustive sense, but the point of being a Christian among the religious, and I'm not talking about the other religions here, just Christianity, to say we believe in God means that we subscribe to God. We love God because God loves us, and we try to live as God wants us to live. So that's what we mean when we say that we believe in God. We might have a fall, a spiritual fall, a big spiritual fall, but to believe in God is not the same as believing in God's existence. One can believe in God's existence, you know, the devil does that, but he does not believe in God, he fights against God. Yes, another concept that's gone out of fashion, the devil. We won't harp on that one because it's incredibly difficult to talk about the devil in a way that gives him his just due but no more in a short time. So, I've got about another 10 minutes, I think. Just wanted to focus on the issue of knowledge.
About 3 or 4 minutes. About 3 or 4 minutes. About 5 minutes.
Alright, 5 minutes it is. I want to talk about the issue of knowledge. Is knowledge possible? Because you see, most modern and postmodern viewpoints will tell you that it's not. Or at least knowledge of big, you know, things. Little things, yes. Big things, no. Little narratives, not grand narratives. Much of the debate in recent decades has been between postmodernists who deny the possibility of grand narratives, and then the remnants of the last grand narrative we had, Marxism. Don't get me wrong, I think there's some useful points in Marxism, but as a grand narrative I think it sucks. And the point here is that, hi Earl, and the point here is that it is not fair to regard Marxism as you know, the archetypal grand narrative. It might be the most recent one we have. It's not an archetypal grand narrative by any sense. In one sense, it's not a grand narrative at all. I don't think that Marx believed in grand narratives himself. There's really only been one grand narrative, and it really goes back to ancient times, Plato and Aristotle, then into Christianity, then into medieval Christianity, and Thomas Aquinas was the biggest light of the Christian philosophical grand narrative. Of course, it's not as if you can prove Christian dogmas necessarily by philosophy. Not all of them anyway, some but not all. The point, however, is that in addition to having its dogmas, which I fully subscribe to, Christianity also tried to put together the whole of human knowledge under one heading, the heading of knowledge. Christianity in its medieval and early modern form, and in the Catholic form even now, and some Protestant forms, claims that it is possible to actually have knowledge, to work it out, to work things out, to actually know what things are, to actually put it all together, but not exhaustively. Because of course knowledge by definition it cannot encompass everything. So Christians claim that we can actually show that God exists philosophically, or at least as much as we can show that he doesn't. But we believe the arguments are quite sound. We believe we can build a whole intellectual conceptual framework which actually encompasses much of reality as it is, which actually refers to things that are real, not fictions of our lives, things that are real. The modern world and the postmodern world has gone in for postmodernism and cultural theory and stuff like that, which for all their values, whatever their value might be, are negatives. They believe we can't get to truth or reality. And if we can't get to truth and reality, then what is left to get to? Well, we can get to God, spiritually speaking, but we should also be able to get to true knowledge, true intellectual reality.
I think you overthink things. Marx is a crackpot, that's it.
One does not need to understand a lot at the intellectual level to be a Christian, not by any means. But why stop at being a Christian, being saved, and all that? The point is that where there is not a Christian framework, we're going to get the anti-Christian frameworks. And that's precisely what leads us to what happens at the universities, the secular ones and the not-so-secular ones. We get information disguised as knowledge, but it's destructive knowledge. Anyway, my time is up.